Hi and welcome. In this video I want to show you how you can create an OpenVPN server in a Docker container and run it on Ubuntu and then connect from another Ubuntu instance to that OpenVPN server. To learn how, stay tuned. Before we get started, let's make sure that Docker is installed on our system. I have here switched over onto my Ubuntu instance and went into the terminal. I have created a folder under Documents called OpenVPN Demo. You can create a folder too, and you can name it whatever you'd like. Again, I called mine OpenVPN Demo. So let's first make sure Docker is installed. So I'll just type a docker-v, and here we go. I have Docker version 20.10 installed, and we're perfectly fine to go with it. If you do not have Docker installed, I will put a link up here, and you can follow that link to one of my videos, how to install Docker on Ubuntu. What we will do next is we will need to download the appropriate Docker image that we will need in order to run our OpenVPN server. There is a very popular one on hub.docker.com. When you go to that webpage and then go into the search box and just type OpenVPN and hit enter, you will see and find Kyle Mana OpenVPN. This is the image that we want to use. You see it has 1.3 thousand stars and over 1 billion downloads. So it's very popular and it's safe to use. So let's click on the name. And then on the next page, you can see the tags that are available, an overview. We don't care about this right now. And what we want to do here is we want to take the docker pull command, and we can just simply copy it. Go back over to our terminal, paste the command in here, and hit enter, and it will go ahead and download the image for us. Perfect. Now that we have our image, we had made sure Docker is installed, we did pull down our image. Let's move on to the next step. During the setup process of our OpenVPN server, we will need our current IP address. So let's go ahead and see how we can find that. Let me clear my screen. And on Ubuntu, you can do this very easy by just typing in IP space addr show. So IP address show, you hit enter. And what you want to look for is this is what we're looking for. And the IP address, my current IP address here is this. This is what we want to use. So 192.168.0.191. This is the current IP address for my image. Another way that you can find your IP address is simply by going into System, under About, and then here where you want to go is into on the very top network, and you see here wired. In my case, I'm using a VirtualBox instance, but you will find this, and then you can go on the little cogwheel here at the end, and then you'll find your IPv4 address right here, which is also 192.168.0.191. Now that we have everything set up that we need in order to create our OpenVPN server in Docker, let's go through the commands that we need to run. I have prepared them here in a text document already, and I'll walk through them real quick. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create and initialize the OpenVPN instance or server. And we do that by creating the OpenVPN config. So we just run a simple docker run, remove when the container stops, we mount a volume, and then we tell it to use the Kyle Mana OpenVPN image, and then we run an OpenVPN gen config, and we pass in UDP:///, and this is where we now need the IP address that we have found. So here is where you want to put your IP address in for the instance on which you will run this Docker container for the host. And then you want to use port 1194. So this is important. At the very beginning, this is where we need the IP address that we found before. After we run this, we want to go ahead and create a certificate, and we run the same Docker image. And the command that we need to run here is a OVPN underscore init PKI. And after that, we will create a client account. The command here is easy RSA, and then, didn't mean to delete it, and then we run the command build dash client dash full space client. After that, we will go ahead and create the client certificate, which will be an OVPN file, which we will need later from the container. And then we will start our OpenVPN container and see if we did everything correctly, and our server will actually start. So let's go ahead and start with the first command. Seeing that I have everything prepared here, I will just simply go ahead and copy this. I'm going back to my terminal, and I'm in my OpenVPN-demo directory. Let's make sure there's nothing in there. There isn't. I will do a right mouse click, paste, and let's run our first command. Great, this completed very quickly. Now let's see if we have produced any files, and look here, we actually have created our openvpn.config file. We have created an ovpn underscore environment.sh, and there is another directory. Now, if you would like to, you can take a look at these. I will not go into each of these files, as this will go beyond the time that I've allotted for this demo, but you should know that these files were created and that these are needed in order to move forward. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next command. So now we want to create our certificate. This is where you will need to provide a password, and you can make up any password that you'd like. So let me copy this command. I will go back into my terminal. I will paste my command here, and I will just hit enter. And now it's asking us to create a new certificate key passphrase. I will keep it simple, and I will just use something very simple. Not that I will tell you which one I'm using, but if you want to obviously go ahead and create something a little bit more secure, you want to use a good password. And then you can give it a name. You can leave it as whatever you want, or you can leave it as default. I will just call it OpenVPN-server, and we'll hit enter. And this may take a little bit, as it tells you here already. This is going to take a long time. I will pause the video here, and I will be back once my certificate has been created. Once our certificate creation process has completed, in my case it took maybe a minute, 2 minutes, it will prompt us for the password again. So we'll enter the password, and we are done with creating our certificate. So let's see what we actually have in our directory right now. You see here now there's a new directory, PKI, so we can peek in there real quick and see what's in there, and permission is denied. So this is protected. So we'll go ahead and run it with a sudo, and it will prompt me for my root password. But now you see here is our certificate that has been created, and PEM files and so forth. So there is a lot of things that have been created during this process. Again, going through everything may take a little while, but if you're interested, you can find all the explanations for what they do and what they're for on the internet. Just Google it up. However, to move on with our demo here, this is what we'll need for right now. So we can move on to the next step. And our next step here is to create the client account. So I will go ahead and copy this command. This did not copy. Let me try that again. My mouse is very finicky today. going back here, let me clear my screen. And now let's go ahead and paste the command to create our client. I will hit enter. And now we need to create a client password. And I'll just create a new password here, and I verify this new password. This will be the password that the client from which we want to connect to our OpenVPN server will have to use. So make sure that you're taking note of that. And then here you want to create, here you want to enter the passphrase for the certificate that we created before in the previous step. Okay. So now we've created a new password for the client here. We've verified the password. And then here in the next step, we had to give it the password of the certificate that we created before. So by now you have two certificates and you should have two different passwords. Okay, we can now go ahead and move on to the next step. And this is that we need to actually copy this client certificate out of our Docker container to our host so that we can send this file or the certificates to the client who will be using it, or the person who will be using it, so they can import it or do whatever they need to do with it. So let me go ahead and copy this command, and back in my terminal here I will clear my screen, and we can go ahead and create this, or copy the, oh, that was a mistake here. Okay, so what I had here is at the wrong name for the certificate. And if I'm now running an ls, you see here is my client OVPN. This is the file that we will need to distribute to whoever needs or wants to connect to our server. You can create multiple files, so you can create a client 1, client 2, client 3, user 1, user 2, user 3, whatever you want. You can create them in the same manner using these two commands. So you want to first create the client account with the name that you want, and then you need to download the certificate for that client so they can use it. So this concludes actually the setup, and now we are ready to run our container and run our server. And therefore we will use this command. So we do a docker run. We give the container a name, OpenVPN. We're mounting our volume here. We're exposing port 1194 on 1194 or 1194 UDP. And then we say also here that we want to always restart, meaning if you leave this option on in Docker, that means if the container stops outside of you executing a Docker stop, it will restart. When you leave the container running or have it stopped and you shut your system down and bring the system back up, the container will automatically start again. And then we'll run our Docker image here. I just wanted to come back to the OpenVPN start container task that we ran here, the command. I just realized I hopped actually over this command, the cap add. So the cap add in Docker allows you to add capabilities to a Docker container. In this case, we're adding Linux capabilities, and netadmin is just allowing it to perform certain network tasks that are necessary for OpenVPN to actually run. So this is what this is. So we'll go ahead and copy this command. And we'll go over to our terminal. We'll paste it into our terminal and hit enter. And now let's make sure that our container is running. So we'll just execute a docker ps, and there is our container, and it's running and it's happy. You can take a look at the logs. And you can see here it's initialized, and everything is running and humming along. So that's perfect. Now let's move on to setting up our client so that we can connect to the server. Now, before we can go ahead and get started working on our client, I just wanted to real quick go back to moving this OpenVPN or OVPN file that we have created that is needed on the client in order to connect to our server. In my case, I'm using VirtualBox instances, so I will move it into a shared folder between my instances. But you can also copy this file with SCP or however you prefer to move files off your host and get them to another person or another client computer in order to establish the connection. So in my case, what I want to do is I got to run it with sudo because my shared folder is protected, and I want to copy the client OVPN into the shared host client OVPN. So this is my command that I want to run, and I'll do that. And now if I'm doing a sudo ls shared host, there is my client OVPN right here. Okay, fantastic. As you see, I've done this a couple of times, so there is some other files which can be removed, but I have them in here. But this is the file that we've just moved. This is the one in question. So now we can open our client and we can work on that. Here I am in the terminal on my client, and I'm in my directory documents OpenVPN_client, and we'll need to go ahead and copy our client.ovpn file over. As I've mentioned before, I'm using VirtualBox instances, so I'm going through a shared folder. In your case, it may be different. So I need to run this as sudo, and then copy shared host client.ovpn, and I want to just copy it to my local directory. I hit enter. Let's make sure it's here. Next step, what we need to do is we need to give read-write permissions on this. So we'll just do a sudo schmat, and I'll just do a 666 client OVPN. Fantastic. So now we are all set up. Let's take a look here. Yes, read-write on all levels, and we're good to go. So how do we use this file now here on our client? In our case, for Ubuntu, I will be using the network manager, and you can just go ahead and just open again system, about, and then in here, I know I have it already open. You want to go to network, and then here you have a VPN section, and this is where you want to add it. So you click this little plus and you see nothing is set up yet. So we'll go ahead and click this, and now you have 3 different choices here. You can create it all manually, you can create point-to-point tunnel protocol, or you can use the import from file. Now our file itself contains all the certificates that we need. So we can take a look at this real quick. We can just do a cat client OVPN. If we take a look at it, you see all these certificates are in here. Obviously there's no keys for these certificates, but meaning your passphrase, but everything else is contained in here. So using the network manager and passing this file into the network manager, it will extract all the information that it needs. So we just say import from file, browse to the directory where your OVPN file is, and then you click on open. And you see here, it has imported everything that is needed, the certificates, the CA certificate, the user certificate, the private key, and so forth. Everything is right here. And then what I suggest, and I've seen this also other people do, go over to the IPv4 tab and make sure that you have automatic DHCP here selected for your IPv4 method. And then we can just click add. And that's it. That's all there's to it. So we have now created our client and we're all set up here. We can close this window. And you may notice now when you go in the upper left hand corner and open your tray icon here, you see now you have VPN here and it's turned off. I will not connect just yet because what I want to do is I want to set it up so that we can actually see the logs on our host at the same time as we're connecting to make sure that we're successfully establishing a connection between our client and our host. So I will be right back. So here I am back and I have overlaid my server window over here. And we can see it as we'll be connecting and we can see the logs. I just ran a simple Docker logs and follow the logs. So on our on our client instance, let's go ahead and actually drop this down and VPN connect. Let's see what happens. It's asking us for the certificate password. This is the password that we have created when we created the client. And I'll hit enter, and as you can tell here, it's successfully connected. Right here you can tell, you can see that it created a client connection right here. And this is how you successfully connect the two. One other way you can check if you're successfully connected is by looking at the routing. This is if you don't have access to the host or cannot verify with somebody with a server, the OpenVPN server, you can just run a IP space RO, and then you will see here that your traffic is actually now routed through our server. And I can show you that this changes once I actually turn the VPN off. So I'll go into VPN up here, client, turn off. Now I'm not connected to my OpenVPN server, and if I'm running the IP RO, you see I'm only having these, and that's it. So this goes how to show how you can set up very simple OpenVPN server in a Docker container, run this Docker container on a Ubuntu host, and then connect from another Ubuntu instance to your OpenVPN server. There obviously is a lot more to OpenVPN and what you can do with this, but this should have been just a demo to show you how you can get started and successfully get this set up. And I hope you found this helpful. Please feel free to leave comments. Feel free to make suggestions for other videos that you may want to see. I appreciate your time watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.